and we'll find out tomorrow who won the much sought after prestigious 110 award. Chapter 12. Chapter 12 is our study for this day. And if you will, please look at the title to chapter 12. Which words have we already had in chapter 12? Let's see here. Have we had the word present? Yes. Have we had middle? No. Have we had and? Yeah. Have we had passive? No. Have we had indicative? Okay, so this lesson is introducing you to the middle and passive voices. We have already covered, folks, the entire active system. And remember, about 75% of all verbs in Greek are active. That's why we started with the active. We did all of the active. Now we need to switch gears a little bit. Our thinking needs to switch a little bit here. Now we're switching from the active to the what? The middle and the passive. If you recall, back on the very second day of class, we talked about the active voice as producing the action. The active voice produces the action. What does the passive voice do? It's just the opposite. Instead of producing the action, in the passive voice, the subject is good, receiving the action. Let me repeat. In the active voice, the subject is producing the action. In the passive voice, the subject is receiving the action. Okay? Then we discuss the middle and the original significance of the middle. Now, this is not the primary meaning of the middle in the New Testament, but it was perhaps the original meaning of the middle voice as it was developed in Greek. And remember how the arrows went on this? Remember how we had one arrow going this way and then we had one arrow going that way? Remember? The original significance of the middle voice seemed to have been this, that the subject was both producing the action as well as receiving it. So if active voice is I am teaching, passive is I am being taught, we might translate the middle, I am teaching myself. See that? If the active voice, I am teaching, the passive voice, I am being taught, the middle voice, I am teaching myself. Now, by the way, that's called the reflexive middle, and it's not the most important middle in the New Testament. In the New Testament, the middle is usually emphasizing the subject. So it's, I am teaching. I am teaching, or I'm teaching for myself, or I'm teaching with relation to myself, or even I'm teaching myself. And there's no single use of the middle voice, as we'll see. There are a number of different kinds of uses when we get to the middle voice. Now, here are the suffixes that you must mesmerize. Here are the middle passive suffixes. They go like this. My, psi, tai, metha, ste, untai. Got that? My, psi, tai, metha. Oh, again, I don't know Greek, I just make it real good. So, dyslexia. My, psi, tai, metha, ste, untai. Say those with me, please. My, psi, tai, metha, ste, untai. Please translate for me. I, you, he, we, you, they. But these are called multiple morphemes because in addition to saying I, you, and all that kind of stuff, they're telling us that the verb is what? Non-active. They can be middle or it can be passive. Got it? It's non-active. Non-active. So this is what you need to memorize. My, psi, tai, metha, ste, untai. My, psi, tai, metha, ste, untai. Just like you memorized. O, ace, a, men, te, usi. And nu, sigma, none, men, te, nu, or psi. Now it's my, psi, tai, metha, ste, untai. My, psi, tai, metha, ste, untai. Got it? Wow. That's all there is to it. My, psi, tai, metha, ste, untai. Untai. I like the untai part. All right. Now watch the board. let's actually form the present middle passive indicative of luo. It goes like this. You put the my, and you put the psi, and you put the tai, and you put the metha, and you put the ste, and you put the untai. And then you put the lu, 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 and then you put the lu. What is my connecting vowel before a mu? Omicron. What is my connecting vowel before a sigma? Epsilon. What is my connecting vowel before a tau? What is my connecting vowel before a mu? What is my connecting vowel before a sigma? What is my connecting vowel before a nu? Okay? Now, the only form that you need to worry about is this one. But for now, I just want you to see the basic pattern. Do you see how this works? So how many morphemes, class, does luamitha contain? Obvious. The first is the lexical morpheme. The second is the neutral. And the last is the person, number, suffix. So you say, why do I have, Dr. Black, why do I have to learn again? Oh, another one. Because these tell you that the verb is non-active. If I used o, or ace, or a, or men, or te, or usi, that means the verb is active, right? Okay. Now, there is one exception to these rules, okay? One exception to these rules. And what is it? Second person singular. Do you see it on the top of 79? Second person singular. Do you see it on the top of 79? Instead of luesi, Greek has what? Now, please notice lue has what? It contains what little doodad? This thingamabobber. It's called the iota. Let me ask you this question. Is it part of the spelling of the word? Yes. Oh, yes. It's part of the spelling of the word. Would you like to know how we got from this to that? Anybody curious? Here's how it worked. Luesi. It should be luesi. But there's something that Greeks didn't like. Greeks didn't like sibilant sounds. You hear the S? They didn't like S's. They didn't like sibilants, like sigmas and stuff like that. So wherever possible, what did they do with sibilant sounds? They got rid of it. See it? They got rid of it. Then this epsilon and this alpha combined. That's called contraction. Now, we haven't studied contraction yet. We will get to a whole separate class of verbs called contract verbs. But the epsilon and the alpha combined to form what letter? Eta. And then can anybody tell me what happened to that little iota at the end there? That's right. It dropped underneath the letter and became the iota subscript. Okay? So actually, you will never see luesi. You will always see lue. So the paradigm, by the way, I don't want you to memorize my a-tai. It's important that you memorize psi, and that you memorize the second singular as an exception to the rule. Let me repeat. Don't memorize my a-tai, memorize my psi-tai. Because very, very shortly, in the very next chapter, you'll see the psi. It doesn't change. So memorize the psi, and then memorize this form as the exception to the rule. So let's look at the paradigm of luomai on the top of page 79. Top of 79, it goes like this. Luomai, lue, luetai, luametha, lueste, luontai. Okay, take a look at that and study that carefully. And here's what we're going to do. In order to translate these forms, I'm going to use the first person plural. Remember, I like to use the first person plural for our examples. So that's what we're going to do. So we have lu, a, me, tha. Does everybody see that's the first person plural? First person plural. Lu, a, me. Okay. Now, did you notice I didn't give you any translations for those forms? And the reason is they can either be middle or passive. So there's no one correct translation. Now here's what you're going to do. Whenever you have a form, listen carefully. Whenever you have a form that permits the middle or passive, the voice you will always start with is the passive. Let me repeat that. Whenever you have a form that can either be middle or passive, like luametha, you will always start with the passive and then go to the middle. The reason is the passive is more common than the middle. The passive is to be expected. The passive is the normal way you would translate this. So there are really There are several ways to translate this. The first is as a passive, and here's how we'll translate it as a passive. Remember, the verbal aspect of lu is imperfective, right? So luamatha, as opposed to luamen, luamen is the active, which means we, no, right there, we are loosing. The passive would be what? Watch this. Not we are loosing, but watch this. We are being loose. Let me try that again. If luamen is we are loosing, luamatha is we are being loosed. I am teaching. You're sitting over there. I am being taught. Got it? I am teaching. I am being taught. We are loosing. We are being. Don't do we are loosed. That's the perfect passive. Do we are being loose. So the first way you'll always try is the passive. Now, if you'll please look at the next page, you'll see there's 3 uses of the middle that you'll need to try if the passive doesn't work. The first is called the reflexive. So let's put reflexive middle. The second is called the intensive. So we'll put the intensive middle. And the last is called the, what's it called? The reciprocal middle. All of these are middle. Now always start with the passive, luamatha, but if the passive doesn't work, then you'll need to try the middle. Okay? You'll need to try the middle voice. And here's the reflexive middle. The reflexive middle is where you're doing it to yourself. So luamatha as a reflexive middle, you will translate how? We are loosing ourselves. Good. The reflexive middle is we are loosing ourselves. You see how that's reflexive? Grammarians call that the reflexive middle. Secondly, the intensive middle focuses upon the subject, the grammatical subject. We. It is we who are loosing. It is we who are doing the action. So how would we translate the intensive middle? Here's how you do the intensive middle. We ourselves are loosing. Can you hear the difference between the reflexive and the intensive? The reflexive is we are loosing ourselves. The intensive is we ourselves are loosing. The idea is we and no others are loosing. It is we who are loosing. That's called the intensive middle. Okay, there's one more. That's called the reciprocal. The reciprocal. Now, it's very close to the reflexive, but try to listen to the difference. The reflexive middle is we are loosing ourselves. Here's the reciprocal. We are loosing one another. We are loosing one another. Now, can you hear the difference between we are loosing ourselves and we are loosing one another? It's very close. Well, let's say I got a phone call. Freyo says, you got a phone call from Virginia. Yes! So, he comes in here and says, you've got a phone call. Okay? So I'm going out and someone says to me, what are your students doing? And I say, well, during my absence, they are teaching themselves. That would imply everyone is sitting at the desk studying. But if I said they are teaching one another, that would imply what? That they're in small groups, right? Discussing the lesson. So the difference between the reflexive and the reciprocal middle is very subtle, but it's real. So let me repeat. Luamatha has 4 possible translations. Which one are you always going to start with? Why? Because by far it's the more common way of rendering it. Always start with the passive. So let's translate luamatha as a passive. You might want to jot these down somewhere. We, help me out, are being loose. Good. As the reflexive middle, we are loosing what? Ourselves. As the intensive middle, we ourselves are loosing. And finally, as the reciprocal middle, we are loosing one another. Okay? Jot these down. Passive voice. We are being loose. Reflexive middle. We are loosing ourselves. Intensive middle. We ourselves are loosing. And finally, the reciprocal middle. We are loosing one another. So when you have Luamata, you can't tell, apart from the context, whether it's going to be passive or the middle, but you're always going to start with which one. And listen, folks, if the passive works, you don't have to try anything else. If the passive works, don't have to try it. Just do the passive. If the passive doesn't work, then you need to try out the different uses of the middle voice. Okay? That is basically how it works in Greek. All right, so please jot this down. We have the passive voice, and then we have three uses of the middle voice. The reflexive middle, the intensive middle, and the reciprocal middle. Okay? Yes, sir?
It seems 2 and 3 are very close.
2 and 4 are very close. Yes, sir, they are indeed. And there's a very subtle distinction, as I said, between we are loosing ourselves and we are loosing one another. But it's there. The distinction is there. Okay. Yes?
What did he say? We ourselves are losing the servant.
We ourselves are loosing? We ourselves are loosing the servant? How do you say we ourselves are loosing the servant? Just like that.
But I think they have done the same way when we have active voice.
Yeah. Remember the middle,
We ourselves.
the middle is not really, the middle is unique. The middle is unique. Let me just put it that way. This sounds active, doesn't it? In fact, we are loosing is active, isn't it? This means what? This means what? We are loosing. Now when I switch to this, when I switch from men to what? To metha, the subject is receiving the emphasis. It is we who are loosing. And the best way of translating that is we ourselves are loosing. Remember, the middle is neither active nor passive. It's somewhere in between. It adds a little connotation to it. Okay? I know this is tough, but just take my word for it. These are the 4 basic ways of rendering the middle of the Luamata. Always start with what? The passive. If the passive doesn't work, then you will just mechanically, methodically go through these different steps until you find one that works. Okay? Until you find one that works. So let me repeat. This lesson is about the present, middle, and passive indicative. The middle and passive suffixes are as follows. My, psi, pi, metha, ste, and ta. These are added to the lexical morpheme along with the appropriate neutral morpheme. These are added to the lexical morpheme along with the appropriate neutral morpheme. You have one exception, and that is the second person singular, which should be lu-si, but it's not lu-si, it is lu-a. And that's because the Greeks thought it sounded better that way. It was for the sake of what we call euphony, just ease of pronunciation, ease of enunciation. Like here's a word in English. But we don't say colonel. Does anybody know how to pronounce this word in English? It's not a major, he's not a general, he's a, we would say colonel. Colonel. In English it's colonel. Now, where do you get colonel out of this? I don't know. It's our mouths. It just comes out of our mouth, that's what, because it's easier to say. Instead of coming out of the mouth, luesa, it came out how? Lue. See that? Instead of coming out of the mouth, luesa, it came out lue. It was just easier to say. They didn't like what kind of sounds. They didn't like sibilant sounds. A sibilant is an S. And the S grated on their ears. So wherever possible, the Greeks tried to get rid of the sibilants. They tried to get rid of the sigmas. Okay? That's another phonological rule that is at work in the language. All right, now, there's one more thing we need to talk about, and that's a whole separate class of verbs. They're called deponent verbs, and deponent verbs are discussed on page 80. Deponent verbs are discussed on page 80. Can I erase this now? Have you had a chance? Okay, great. Let me give you a definition of a deponent verb. A deponent verb. A deponent verb is a verb that is middle or passive in form, but actually it is active in function. Let me repeat that. This is a brand new concept for you. Brand new. A deponent verb is a verb that is middle or passive in form, but it's active in function. These are verbs like this verb, I pray, proseuchomai. Proseuchomai. This is a new word in your vocabulary, proseuchomai. There is no proseucho. It's proseuchomai. It is a verb that is middle or passive in form, but active in function. This isn't I am being prayed or I am praying myself. This is just I am praying. I am praying to God. By the way, have we had a noun that's related to this? I don't know. Have we had prayer? What is it? Proseuche, right? Proseuche is a noun. Translate proseuche. Prayer. It's a noun. Translate proseuchomai. I pray. I pray. Notice the verb is middle. There is no omega. Somewhere in the history of this word, omega was thrown away and put out to pasture and never seen again. So you say, well, this must be middle. No, it's not middle. It's not passive. You translate it as an active verb. And verbs that have thrown away their active forms and only have middle and passive forms in Greek are called what kind of verbs? Deponent verbs. Say that word. Deponent. It comes from the Latin word deponere, which means to set aside. These are words that have set aside their active forms and only have middle or passive forms. Now, by the way, in the vocabulary to this lesson, we're going to introduce you to the most common deponent verbs in the New Testament. You're going to get them all right here in this lesson. And so they have to be mastered. These are the most common the most common deponent verbs that occur in the New Testament. And as you can see, they're very, very common verbs, right? I pray, prayer is a very, very common idea in the writings of the New Testament. Okay. So, let's take a look at the vocab in this lesson. Vocabulary, it's on page 81. And let's see, we have just two additional verbs. Two additional omega verbs. They're on the bottom of page 81. The first is archo, which is I rule. Now, by the way, did you notice in parentheses it says takes the genitive? What is the case of the direct object in Greek? The direct object, what is the case? It's accusative, right? But here's a verb that breaks the rules. I rule takes the genitive case. Okay, that's why I said takes the genitive. There are a couple verbs like this in Greek that you need to know. Okay, so if I say I rule the world has to be in what case? So let's do that. I rule, give me the world. It has to be in the genitive case. To cosmos. I rule the world. Originally, the idea was this. I am the ruler. See that now? I am the ruler of the world. But we don't translate this I am the ruler. We just say I rule the world. So this is a verb that takes its object not in the accusative case, but in the genitive case. So please make a note of that, especially if you're working on extra credit. Especially if you're trying to go from English into Greek. You have to remember, argo takes its object not in the normal case of the object, which is the accusative case, but in the genitive case. Yes, sir. Repeat this what?
Yes.
Repeat what? The idea. Argo is a verb that takes its object in the genitive case rather than in the accusative case, right? Help me out here. Blepo, ton, cosmon. Translate. I see the world. Arko to cosmo. I rule the world. This breaks the rules, doesn't it? The world as the object should be in what case? Accusative case. It breaks the rules. Now why does it break the rule? Well, originally Arko had this idea. I am the ruler of the world. I am the ruler of the world. One other verb we're introducing in this lesson is huparko. I am or I exist. By the way, we've already learned the word I am, haven't we? What word is that? Amy. So this is a synonym of Amy. Turn the page. Here are the deponent verbs. Here are the deponent verbs. Here we go. These verbs need to be mastered. They need to be mesmerized and remembered. Although you will not be able to translate your Greek New Testament. These words are so common that if you forget them, you will not be able to translate your Greek New Testament. Here we go. Apokrinomai, I answer. Arkamai, I begin. Aspadzamai, I greet. Boulamai, I wish. Ginamai, I become or I am. Decamai, I receive. Ekpariuamai, I come out or I go out. Ergadzamai, I work. Erkamai, I come or I go. Ooh, this is a long one here. It's got two gammas in it. Let me try to figure that out. Two gammas. Let's see, that was an NG sound, wasn't it? So let's see how to pronounce this word. Euangelidzamai. Euangelidzamai. I preach the gospel. Logidzamai. I consider. Paruamai. I come or I go. Prosukamai. I pray. And sunamai. It doesn't mean I lie down. It means I tell a lie. I lie. I tell a lie. Okay? Let me go over these again. Notice that none of them end in omega. Because they are what kind of verbs? They're deponent verbs. Just listen as I go through the list again. Apokrinomai. Arkamai. Aspadzamai. Boulamai. Ginamai. Decamai. Ekpariuamai. Ergadzamai. Erkamai. Euangelidzamai. Logidzamai. Paruamai. Prosukamai. Pseudamai. Remember that pseudamai is kind of a PS with your lips closed. Pseudamai. In English we would just say pseudamai, wouldn't we? But in Greek you would say pseudamai. Pseudamai. It gets kind of wet. Pseudamai. Okay. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to work on some of these. Oh, one more thing. When parsing a deponent verb, this will go in the voice slot. This will go in the voice slot. DEP, which stands for what? Deponent. Okay? Okay, so the verbs in this lesson can be active, but in addition they can also be passive, or they can be middle, or they can be deponent. You know what that means? Oh, this is I'm so sorry, sad to have to tell you this, but forevermore, you will never ever be able again to say active indicative. Right? Right? It's not automatic anymore. You can't do that. Because the verb now can be active, right? Or it can be passive, or it can be middle, or it can be deponent. Okay, now, how about indicative? Yeah, we can still say indicative. Yeah, that's the good news.
The bad news is, we can't say Agnew. I was having so much fun saying that, weren't you? Agnew. All right. All right, now, here's the ones I want you to work on, okay? Work on number 1. Number 2. Number 5. Number 7. And number 15, okay? Numbers 1, 2, 5, 7, and 15. Take about 15 minutes, if you will, to work on this, and then we'll look at them on the board together. Thank you. What is the difference between Erkamai and Paryumai? None. None. Good question. They are what we call synonyms. Okay? By the way, what's the difference between I come and I go? It's your perspective, right? Like the gospel says, Jesus came into Galilee. And another English Bible will say Jesus when? It all depends on where you are, the writer, right? If you are in Galilee, Jesus came. If you are outside of Galilee, Jesus. So the same verb, oddly enough, can be translated come or go. It all depends on the author's perspective. All right, let's work on these together. Exercises together. We are introducing again something brand new, aren't we? The present, middle, and passive indicative. We're always going to start with which one? If it can be middle or passive, we're always going to start with which one, group? The passive. Why? Because the passive voice is the more common. Look at sentence number 1. Luantai is a verb. Poiduloi is in what case? Lupan produces a prepositional phrase. For the sake of time, let's go ahead and just translate the subject first. The servants or the slaves. Go to your verb. Now, let's do it as a passive, shall we? Are being loosed. Good. Don't do are loosed, because that would be the perfect tense. Are being loosed. Let's pick up our leftovers, please. By the apostles. Give me the whole sentence, if you will, please. The servants are being loosed by the apostles. Now parse for me Luantai. Ready? Begin. Present, passive, indicative. The untai tells you it's what person and number? Third, plural. And what is your source? Luo. Got it? Let me repeat that. It's present, passive, indicative, third, plural, luo. By the way, in parsing, you'll never go present, middle. No, you have to choose. Okay, you have to choose. Which one is it? The context tells you. Which one is it? The passive. So always parse according to the translation. See that? So let's parse Luantai again. Remember, the form permits middle or passive, but let's parse Luantai again. Ready, begin. Present, passive, indicative, third, plural, luo. How many morphemes does Luantai contain? 3. Can you please tell me what they are from left to right? Lexical, neutral, person, number. But this is a multiple morpheme. It also tells you it is non-active. It would permit the passive, it would permit the middle, and in some verbs, it would permit the deponent. Okay? Good. Sentence number 2, Didaskatai is the, Aletheia is in the, Dia is the, and tone, Mathin is in the genitive. Okay, start with the subject, please. Aletheia. The truth. Now this verb permits middle or passive. What am I going to start with? Passive. So translate for me the truth. Didaskatai. Is being taught. Got it? Stop right there. Everything's out. Everything else is a leftover. The truth is being taught. Okay? Dianton guion. Through or by the sons. Genitive case. What's my helping word? Translate ton matheton. Of the disciples. Put the whole sentence together for me, please. The truth is being taught by the sons of the disciples. Partially didaskatai, according to the context. Are you ready? Present, passive, indicative, third, singular, didasko. Got it? Present, passive, indicative, third, singular, didasko. Any questions? Are you getting it? Not that bad, is it? Sozantai, what part of speech, class? Oil, akoi, what case, class? Ek tu kosbu, a prepositional phrase. Please translate the subject. The crowd. Now the form permits middle or passive. That's no problem though, because I'm always going to start with the what. And if it works, I don't have to go any further than that. So let's start with the passive. The crowds are being saved. Got it? Now do you need to go any further? No. Especially if you're a Calvinist. But if you're an Arminian, you might want to try the middle voice. The crowds are saving themselves. Got it? Yeah. Yeah, it would permit that, wouldn't it? So you see how your theology always determines your translation. No, it's the opposite. But the form permits, right? Pick up your prepositional phrase. Out of the world. Give me the whole sentence, please. The crowds are being saved out of the world. Parse for me, sodzantai. Ready? Begin. Present, passive, indicative, third, plural. So now let's say somebody in here actually did translate it, the crowds are saving themselves out of the world. That would be acceptable. But then you would have to parse according to what? Your translation. If it's an acceptable translation, then your parsing must always correspond to what? Your translation. So if we had translated this, the crowds are saving themselves, then we would parse sodzantai how? Present, middle. Now you don't have to tell which use of the middle. Present, middle, indicative, third, plural sozo. Do you see how that works? Sometimes more than one acceptable translation will be possible. Okay? Just to be honest with you, as you go through these exercises, sometimes more than one translation is acceptable. Okay? If that is the case, parse according to what? Your translation. But never go like this. Never go N/B. Commit yourself, both in your translation and in your parsing. Ekbalantai is a verb. Ekton ekklesion is a prepositional phrase. Oipaneroi, matetai is in the what case? Now, please translate the subject first. The evil disciples. Now, we got, is it middle or passive? Well, let's try the passive and see if it works. The evil disciples are being cast or are being thrown. Good. Don't forget the ek. Are being thrown out. And then the prepositional phrase. Out of the churches. Plural, right? Out of the churches. Now notice in Greek you repeat the ek, but in English you can't do it. In English you can't. You can't say the evil disciples are being thrown out of the churches. That's not a translation, that's a what? Over translation. So let's reduce it to a good English translation. Are you ready? The evil disciples are being thrown out of the churches. Okay? Now, did anybody do it as a middle? Again, the form would permit it. The evil disciples are casting themselves out. They're not only evil, they're stupid. The evil disciples are throwing themselves out of the churches. Now, if you translate it that way, you'd have to what? Parse it that way. But since most of us, I assume, translated it as the evil disciples are being thrown out, let's parse ekbalantai, according to that translation. Are you ready? Present, passive, indicative, third, plural on the sources. Good, thank you. Never say bala. if the verb is a compound verb, you must always give the compound source. This verb is not from bal, it's from what? Thank you. It's from ekbal. Always parse the compound source. Got it? Any questions on number 7? Okay, one more. Pariuestat, verb. Ekte serenu is a prepositional phrase. Kai is a conjunction. Eis, tan, oikon is a prepositional phrase. So, go to the verb. Pariuestat. And translate. You what? Came? What tense is it? Present. You are coming. You are going. Or you come, or you go, right? Pick up this prepositional phrase. Where do you go? You're going out of the wilderness. And where else are you going? And into the house. You are going out of the wilderness and into the house. You come, you go, you are coming, you are going. Any of those would be fine. Any of them. You come, you go. You are coming, you are going. I would accept any of them.
What about you came?
Well, why would you want to do a past? Where's the past in here? Have we? What tense is this? Present tense. Yeah. Do it as a present tense. If the verb is present tense, don't translate it as a past tense. Okay, now let's parse. Pariuestat. Now be very, very careful here. What tense is it? Present. What voice? It's depoted. Okay, so in the voice slide you'll put DEP. DEP. The mood is indicative. Stat tells you it's what person and number. Second plural. Now watch this. What is the source? This is called an opponent verb. The source is par, you, mine. See that? There is no paruo. The source is paruomai. What kind of a verb do we call that? A deponent verb. What is a deponent verb? A verb that is middle or passive in form but active in function. Let me repeat that. A deponent verb is middle or passive in form, but what in function? Active in function. And how do you parse a deponent verb? What will go in the voice slot? This DEP, see that? Just DEP will be enough. Deponent. That's all you need. Once again, let's parse Pariuestat. Ready? Begin. Present, deponent, indicative, second, plural, paruomai. See that? Paruomai. Any questions over any of these? I know we've gotten quickly, but any questions over them? Yes, sir.
Can you translate its meaning, please?
This one here? Oh, no. Let me repeat the definition of a deponent verb. A deponent verb is one that is middle or passive. In what? Form. But what in function? Active. You can never translate it as a middle. You can never translate it as a passive. You must always translate it as an active, right? As an active. Good question. But no, you cannot do it as a middle, and you cannot do it as a passive. Anything else?
Sir,
Yes.
I face problem around parsing.
The what?
Parsing. Parsing.
Oh, parsing, yes.
I especially in the area of number and
In deponent?
in the area of number,
In the area of number. Okay.
singular, plural.
Right. Right.
I don't know.
You just have to memorize it. Just have to memorize it. Now you haven't memorized the suffixes yet, have you? But you will by tomorrow. My, psi, tai, meta, ste, and tai. Is ste singular or plural? Well, okay, in my mind's eye, I have a singular column and I have a plural column. It goes like this. My, psi, tai, meta, ste, and tai. So ste has to be what? Plural, right? Ste has to be plural. How about untie? How about untie? My, psi, tai, meta, ste, untie. So untie has to be what? Singular or plural? Plural. See how that works? And that's, in my mind's eye, that's how I would memorize it. I would really always memorize singular, plural, and then 1, 2, and 3, right? Oe se, mente usi, nu sigma non, mente nu arsan. Mai sai, tai, metha, ste, untai. That's how I would do it. And just, I know there's a lot to keep together there. There's an awful lot to keep together there, but try to organize it in your mind that way. Okay, organize it in your mind so that you see it. Even though you're not looking at it, you see it. All right, what are the exercises for today? Let's turn to page 82. 82. Read the lesson how? Carefully, that's right. Learn by heart the what? Let's see, the primary middle suffixes. What page is that on? Primary middle suffixes. Where is that to be found? Page number 78. You see it at the bottom there? The quiz purpose is you better be able to regurgitate my, psi, time, meta, slip, time. Mesmerize the vocab, work on the translation and the parsing, and you will do fine. Tomorrow is our quiz over chapter 12, okay? And I also have the exams back for you. Now, we do have some quizzes, and we're going to... Ledetu, would you mind passing these out for us today? These are the quizzes from yesterday. And when you get your quiz, you are free to leave. Let's just have a word of prayer to close. And when you get your quiz back from Ledetu, you are free to leave today. Let's pray together. Father, you've been good to us, much better to us than we deserve. So we give you thanks. Dismiss us now, O Heavenly Father, with the blessing of your presence, purpose, and power. In Jesus' name. Thank you, brother.